with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids' teachers, their principal, their librarian, and also please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Leslie Kimmelman. She is here to celebrate Ready, Set, Run. Before we invite Leslie into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Adelaide and the Cosmic Rescue Squad, a delightful book written by Zoe Twitt. It's Halloween, and Adelaide and her friends are going trick-or-treating. As it gets dark, Adelaide's stomach begins to hurt, and her heart starts beating faster. Suddenly, a tiny witchlet named Zara appears in a golden bubble with some good advice for Adelaide and her friends. She tells them to imagine themselves inside a glittering golden bubble. She shows them how to spread the golden light all around to help others who are also scared of the dark. This is a wonderful story written by a pretty wonderful author. Zoe Twitt is a children's author, originally from Victoria, Australia. She's a graduate of the University of Melbourne, and she now lives here with her family in Virginia. You're just going to love her book. Check it out for yourself. Adelaide and the Cosmic Rescue Squad. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is also brought to you by the Princess of Picky Eating Tries New Foods. This is a fantastic book that was written by a registered dietitian and mom named Stacy Woodson. Stacy was inspired to write this children's book about her family. It's really a whole lot of fun. Whenever the main character is offered a new food, their favorite phrase is, "No thank you, not today, no way." Stacy also wrote The Prince of Picky Eating Tries New Foods, in case you have a young male picky eater who may relate better to a prince. Check out both books today. If you like to eat, these books are for you. If you like to try new foods, these books are for you. And if you don't like to try new foods, these books are especially for you. The Prince and Princess of Picky Eating Tries New Foods, two fantastic books by Stacy Woodson. Join us right now from right outside of New York City. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new book. It's called Ready, Set, Run, the amazing New York City Marathon. Please welcome to the show, Leslie Kimmelman. Hey, Leslie, how are you?
Hi, fine. Thanks so much for having me on.
Delighted to have you on. Leslie wasn't sure. She was kind of surprised since I was from Boston that I invited her on to celebrate a book about the New York City Marathon. She was afraid that I might have those feelings about the Boston Marathon, but I think a marathon is such an amazing, being able to run a marathon is such an amazing accomplishment. I think no matter where you do it, it's something we should celebrate.
I totally agree. And, I sort of think that, to me, the book isn't just about marathons. It's about the spirit of the marathon. And that's certain for any location that the marathon is run, which is all over the world, including in the Olympics.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that spirit, a spirit that somebody, because you really do, you really do need a certain spirit and temperament and mindset to be able to run over 26 miles.
I have to say I am not a runner, which is, I was very briefly a runner in college, but I have bad knees, so I'm not a runner. But that's the magic of being an author. You can be whatever you want to be, and the magic of being a reader, for that matter. You don't have to be a runner. I think what I love about marathons is how everyone comes together to cheer on the runners. And as an example, last year I watched the marathon in person. Sometimes I watch it in person, sometimes on TV. Last year I was there watching, and it was just a couple days before the midterm elections, which, as we all know, were pretty contentious. There was not, you would never have known the election was coming. Everyone was there. Everyone was cheering on every single runner. It's just such a great feeling. And I'm sure it's the same in Boston. Everyone comes together and everyone is just full of the spirit of, come on, you can do it. You can do it. And, it's a feeling that I don't think you get every day in a city. And it's a wonderful time.
Well, you're absolutely right, and certainly that is the case in Boston. Millions of people line up along the 26-mile route to cheer, literally to cheer everybody on. And when you're talking about a marathon, whether it's in Boston or a city like New York, you're talking about athletes who come to these cities from around the world, and it really is a way for people around the world. It's a way for the world to come together for a few hours.
Absolutely. I think the New York City Marathon has people from over 100 countries, and those are the elite runners. But don't forget, there are also people from all over this country that are not necessarily runners. They just want to do it. They want to be able to say they did it. And that also is the magic. First, you see this group of elite runners who are just incredible. And then you see people from every walk of life, every body type, some in wheelchairs, some with crutches, some are blind, some are not in great shape, and everyone is just willing them on. And it's one of my favorite things about the marathon is that people write their name on their name tag. I'm sure they do this in Boston too. So in addition to their number, they have their name written, and people on the sidelines are just shouting their names, not knowing them. And every time you do that, the person turns to you with a big smile like, "Ooh, you're shouting me on." It's just a great feeling to watch that race.
It really is. And again, going back to that spirit of camaraderie that can transcend political differences. And that is, I almost, the marathon is a real disruption to regular, ordinary life here in Boston. Right. But in some ways, it would be really nice if you could just, disrupt all that contentiousness that we feel so much these days, and
bottle that spirit and spread it through the year. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
For sure.
And you're right. Here in Boston, we had a famous father-son duo. Dad would push his son,
I remember.
the Hoyts, and they were, part of the marathon for so long and so inspirational. And there's so many stories like that. Was it one particular thing and one particular story that inspired you to write this book for kids?
There was not. I have to give some credit to my daughter who lives in Brooklyn, and she lives on the route of the marathon in Brooklyn. And we've all been, we all watch it every year. And she said about 3 or 4 years ago, just turned to me and said, "No one's written a book about the marathon, and it's like my favorite day." And I looked at her and I was like, "You're right." And that's what made me write it. It wasn't one particular story. It was just my love for this particular day. And I will say that when I moved to New York, which was in 1980 after college, one of the very first things that I moved in the fall, and one of the very first events that I went to in New York was the marathon. And actually I gave out water. In those days, you could just volunteer and you could hand out water. And I just thought, this is the greatest thing. It's just so full of good spirit. And so I've always been a fan. I don't think there was one particular story, although they're great at bringing out stories every year. The people who are covering it are giving you different human interest stories. They're always good. So.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about your book, is that the art is wonderful, and especially the cover art that it has the city in the background, but it is just celebrating the fact that everybody is a part of it. There's a beautiful rainbow of humanity all running and sweating and getting stinky together.
For sure. And I think, I mean, that's what you see when you first watch the race. That's the first thing that hits you. My gosh, people are here from all over the world. Every permutation of being human is represented in this race, not to mention the people who are watching. And it's also from very young to very old. The runners have to be 18, but the spectators, I mean, they have babies out there holding signs. It's just incredible.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you were a runner for a little time in your life. Did you contemplate doing the marathon at that time?
I don't think I ever did. I have to admit, I think the most I ever ran was about 4 miles. I was not a serious runner.
Yeah.
I'm a swimmer. I do a lot of swimming. I do not do a lot of running.
Boston tried to introduce a junior marathon back in the 70s, and I took part in it. And they didn't map out the course all that well, and the group that I was running with we got lost, and we were running on train tracks and everything. I don't know if we ran more or less, but we all ended up at the finish line, and we had a great big bowl of beef stew, which was fun. But they never did. They never did that again.
One interesting thing I learned when I was researching this book was that back at the very beginning, there was no age parameters, and a kid ran it at age 8. Can you imagine an 8-year-old running 26 miles? Mm-mm. Then they quickly put in some rules, but it does go to show that this is sort of, it speaks to everyone. You know, everyone has that. I have to say it's the only time I ever feel like running is when I watch this thing, but I think the ship has sailed.
Yeah. Yeah, typically when I'm at the Boston Marathon, I am typically at around the finish line, and I'm oftentimes there when the elite runners come through. So at hour 3 and 4 and 5, and I see the near death condition a lot of those runners are in.
I mean, it is amazing, and there are people in their 80s running.
Right.
I mean. It's really incredible. It's very inspirational, I think.
It is. One of the things, I don't know if this was true down in New York, but I know in Boston that women were not allowed to run in the race until the end of the last century. Hard for me to talk about the last century when I was alive. But
so not until 2000?
No, not until I think the 70s it was. I think.
Okay, so 70s. Same thing. The New York Marathon started in 1970. That's the first year, and women were allowed to run in 1972. Only 6 women ran that year, and there's a terrific picture. If you Google the New York Times, you can find it. The 6 women were given a 10-minute head start. And they were very offended. So when the starting gun went off, they sat down and then waited and went off with the men. Oh. But yeah, for the first 2 years, no women.
Yeah. I think that would be an interesting conversation for families to have as they're reading and enjoying Ready, Set, Run. Just sit down and think, hey, one time women weren't allowed to run in this. What do you think about that? And I have a feeling that young kids would probably say, well, that's dumb.
I mean, really, young kids and old kids and adults. What was that about?
Yeah.
And the same thing with wheelchair. Right. They make a big deal now. The wheelchair division is actually the first start. They start first because when you have 55,000 people, you can't all start at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then also, I mean, definitely did not start at the beginning. That was added later.
Right.
And it's I don't know, Boston, I'm sure, has the same thing. Watching those guys race, or guys and women race in wheelchairs, they are phenomenal.
Yeah. They really are. And the chairs that they are racing in.
Yeah.
Is phenomenal. I just, people who listen to the podcast know that I just had an accident and I spent 3 months in a wheelchair here.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I didn't have one of those fancy, sleek, aerodynamic wheelchairs. And
right.
I the first time I went out, my beautiful wife and I, we went 2 blocks, and I felt like I had just rolled the whole marathon. So,
that was one of the the artist who I have to give a shout out to because her work is unbelievable, I think, in this book. She did such a fabulous job. But when she first did the sketches, she had the runners in regular wheelchairs. I don't think she realized that, no, there's a whole different kind of wheelchair that people use in the races. And there are different varieties of the wheelchairs. But if you look at them, they're pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's the marathon. It obviously celebrates the human spirit and athleticism, but I think it also celebrates engineering. When you talk about those chairs, you're talking about the running shoes that athletes are using. You're talking about some athletes who show up and run bare feet, and for some
right,
marathons.
and also there are some people that run with prosthetic legs,
right.
And over the years they've changed and become a lot more, effective,
right.
And quick. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, the other thing it celebrates is just that in addition to everybody coming together to cheer the runners on, it takes an entire city to come together to make it happen. We're not talking about athletes running around a track 26 times. We're talking about athletes running a course that is 26 miles.
Right.
In New York, it goes through all 5 boroughs. Is that right?
All 5 boroughs. And I will say that this past year when we watched it, we were staying at my daughter's house. So after most of the runners had gone through, and it takes hours. It's just hours and hours and hours of runners. And then we saw the cleanup crew moving in. And that too is really fun for a little kid to watch. They have a huge cleanup crew that comes and is sweeping the streets, and they have machines taking up the trash. And it's just fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And I think your book just gives families so much to talk about, have these conversations, that I think, lots of times parents complain about, oh, my kid wants me to read this book again.
Right.
But that if you read the book again, it doesn't have to be the same because you can have a different conversation. And Ready, Set, Run certainly lends itself to so many conversations that would be so valuable to have with your kids.
I hope so. And I hope parents will point out the diversity, but also the diversity of the neighborhoods. I mean, that's, to me, one of the fun things about the New York City Marathon is that it goes through vastly different neighborhoods. It goes through, the Bronx, where they have one kind of feeling, and then it goes through the Hasidic community in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and it goes through Manhattan, and and every single neighborhood has a very different feel. And one of the things I put in the book is, at one particular place there are Japanese drummers playing, and at another particular place they're playing the Rocky theme, and there are all kinds of neighborhood flavors. And I think that's one thing that parents can point out also as they read the book, and even go on a neighborhood walk. What do you notice about your neighborhood? Like, what are the things that you take away from the stores and the people and the kind of restaurants that are in your neighborhood? It's very clear when you watch it on TV, especially, that every single neighborhood has a very different flavor to it.
Yeah. And I think that's an incredibly valuable conversation to have, not just to celebrate the diversity that you find in New York City or any big city, but our neighborhoods, no matter where you are in the country, are diverse, even though on the surface it might seem like everybody here is the same.
Right.
If you dig down into it and you get to know folks and the people of the neighborhoods a little bit more, there's certainly diversity there. And so that's something I think that we can really help our kids start to embrace on a local level.
Absolutely. And I also want to just point out my favorite part of this book is that when they start out the race, you can pull out both sides of the page. So it's a big, long, open up illustration of them starting to run. Just wanted to mention that. It's my favorite thing.
Very cool. Hey, I wanted to ask before we finish here, I noticed on your website and the, some of the things you might not know about me is that you worked at Sesame Street. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I worked there for almost 25 years. So a long haul at Sesame Street. It was a fabulous place to work. I retired, so that's the only reason I left, not to find another job, just to retire to write and enjoy my family. It's a place that is extremely creative. Just you feel like bathing in creativity, and also just has such a great mission, worldwide mission, that it just makes it fun to work there. I worked at Sesame Street magazine for many years, which no longer exists. And then I worked in the book department, and I also worked doing a lot of their, what do you call them? Their outreach programs. So they do a lot of outreach. So they did an outreach on autism, and they do an outreach on children whose parents are in the military. And I did a lot of work on those different projects as well. Wonderful. It was a great 24 years.
Yeah, such a big part of so many kids' lives.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to point out that you have a new book coming out in just a few days. It's called A Book About Bupkis. You give us a little preview of what we might find in that book?
Yeah. Well, Bupkis is the Yiddish word for nothing. So the main theme of the book, it's a lot of fun. It's very light. It's not much text. But the basic gist of it is that Bupkis is not truly Bupkis, that what you think is something little or insubstantial can actually turn out to mean a lot. Like, for example, if you see another child that's sitting on a bench and she's all alone, and you invite them to play with you, that may seem like, I think it's very normal to think, oh, we're just one person, there's not much we can do. But actually, every little thing you do turns out to have a lot of import for someone. Maybe just one person, maybe a small group of people, but nothing is truly Bupkis. So that's the gist of the book.
I love that. And what a great lesson for our kids to learn, too.
Yeah.
Hey, we would be remiss if we didn't give you a chance to teach us where we could go to find out more about you, find out more about Ready, Set, Run, and all the other great things that are coming from you.
Well, I have a website. It's just LeslieKimmelman.com, and it has all my books and a lot of facts about me. And it even has a little thing you can write to me from there. And I also want to say it's Random House Studio. I should give them some credit. They did a great job with the design. And please write me. If you get the book and you like it or you don't like it, let me know. And can't think of anything else.
And if it inspires you to run a marathon, please let Leslie know.
Yeah, please let me know that. I'll run it vicariously with you.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Ready, Set, Run, a great picture book from our friend Leslie Kimmelman. Leslie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun, and I hope whoever reads this book really loves it, because it's a lot of fun.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading With Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Kevin Martin. He'll be here to celebrate his book, All Is Well. Kevin is a good friend of mine. You are going to love him. Yeah, I guarantee. Don't miss it. It's the next episode of the podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Leslie Kimmelman. Run out to the store to get your copy of Ready, Set, Run. Also want you to run out to your local bookstore to pick up copies of our sponsors' books. Zoe Twit, please check out her book, Adelaide and the Cosmic Rescue Squad. And if you have a prince or princess who is a picky eater, you absolutely want to check out Stacey Woodson's The Princess of Picky Eating Tries New Foods. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Madison Dieris, Monica Rivera Sosa, Soji Franklin, Ann O'Leary. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.